This book is both an extremely well-written tale about the ghost of a dead photographer searching for his killer, and a history lesson about a conflict not many outside of South Asia would have a handle on. I'm Matchstick, and I review paranoir, or noir with supernatural aspects, which is a genre I write. First off, The Seven Moons of Maali Almeida is probably too good to be considered genre fiction by most, but it uses the afterlife as its main plot device. The protagonist is flawed and crafty, and it's a mystery, so it definitely counts. Although it's certainly more of a big picture book that uses its story to make a point, the story itself is crazy engaging and propels the book. I'd look at it more as the cream at the top of genre fiction than an example of transcending it, although maybe it's both. Either way, the author, Shehan Karunatilaka, could probably write a paranoir movie plot in his sleep. The book was initially titled Chats with the Dead and was released in 2020 for the South Asian subcontinent, i.e. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, etc. It was then picked up by an independent publisher in the UK, heavily revised to make it more palatable for international audiences, and published as The Seven Moons of Maali Almeida for the rest of the world in 2022. The author has said that the international version is tighter and more accessible and is probably the definitive version. The reason for the edits was, apparently, that the subcontinent's version was confusing and impenetrable for Western audiences. That said, the politics are still complicated, the different factions are hard to get a handle on, and I wish the explanation of them was easier to find as I kept going back to it. And the world building is still pretty thick. I can definitely see why the edits were made, as Sri Lankan history isn't something the globe as a whole is familiar with, and because Western audiences are used to easily digestible media like Hollywood movies, which this is not. But the bottom line is that whatever edits it took for the book to reach a global audience, and however Seven Moons reached its current form, I'm very glad it did because this book is amazing. The plot follows a war photographer that has just been murdered as he tries to figure out who killed him, but is also a story with political intrigue as he had taken photographs of, for example, various political figures witnessing crimes, and is hoping to influence the living so that they can get the photos out to the world. The content of the photographs is part of the book's plot, and there are some crazy twists there. One made me physically react to the book. The prose and especially the dialogue are also very, very sharp and will have you laughing and shaking your head. How Karunatilaka pulls all this off is basically a miracle. Seven Moons does many things and does them all well. It's worth noting that Maali Almeida's character, the protagonist, is loosely modeled on real-life journalist and human rights activist Richard de Zoysa, a major figure in recent Sri Lankan history. But Maali is a serial cheater and a hopeless gambler, and I believe de Zoysa was neither. Besides having taken the photographs that drive the plot, Almeida is also inconsequential to the story of Sri Lanka, while de Zoysa's death was a turning point in Sri Lankan politics. Both figures, I believe, were homosexual, however. The book, as I said, is horribly violent and gory. Descriptions of dead bodies are especially grisly, but if you can stomach that, The Seven Moons of Maali Almeida is probably the best fiction book I have ever read at this point. The audacity, the ambition, the way the punches actually connect, it's just epic. It may be that part of this is just me as a writer looking on in awe, but the book did win the Man Booker Prize for 2022, which only goes to one novel a year and is considered one of the most important prizes in fiction, so it's a shared opinion. I highly suggest reading it. It deserves its roses. The fact that it teaches the reader about a conflict that most of the world has looked away from is icing on the cake. I've always thought a war reporter would be just a great character, a female war reporter James Bond or something, and this approaches that. The Seven Moons of Maali Almeida is the real deal. Get yourself a copy.